My brother said it to me at my own mother's funeral. Not privately. Not with any kind of gentleness. He said it in the parking lot of the church, loud enough for our aunt and 2 cousins to hear, while I was still holding the funeral program with her photo on the front. You know you can't do this without us, right? You've never handled anything on your own. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I folded the program carefully, tucked it into my purse, and looked at him the way you look at someone who has just shown you exactly who they are. His name is Rowan. He's 4 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has spoken to me like I was borrowed furniture, useful when needed, easy to overlook otherwise. His wife, Penny, stood 3 steps behind him, nodding like his words were reasonable. They always nodded together, those 2. A matched set. My mother had been sick for 2 years. A slow illness, the kind that takes things from a person in small pieces until there's nothing left to take. During those 2 years, I was the one who drove her to appointments. I was the one who learned her medication schedule, who reorganized her finances, who sat beside her bed on Tuesday nights when she couldn't sleep and just wanted to hear someone's voice. Rowan visited at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Penny sent a fruit basket once. So when he said what he said in that parking lot, something inside me went very quiet, not the sad kind of quiet. The kind that means you finally stopped waiting for something that was never coming. I drove home alone. I sat in my car in my apartment complex for 20 minutes before going inside. My phone buzzed twice. Rowan, asking if I was coming to the family dinner at his house that weekend to discuss Mom's affairs. I left it on red. My mother's attorney called the next morning. Her name was Sylvia, and I had met her once before, briefly, at the hospital when my mother was having a good week and wanted to update some paperwork. Sylvia had shaken my hand with both of hers and said, "Your mother speaks very highly of you," which at the time I'd taken as polite small talk. "I know the timing is difficult," Sylvia said on the phone, "but there are things in your mother's estate that require your attention soon. Can you come in Thursday?" I said yes without asking why. Something in her voice made me feel like I already needed to know. I didn't tell Rowan about the call. The 2 days between that phone call and Thursday were strange. Rowan texted 3 more times, each one a little more clipped than the last, asking about the house, asking about the savings account, asking why I hadn't responded about the weekend dinner. Penny called once and left a voicemail that started with, "We're just trying to be organized," and ended with, "Rowan thinks you're being emotional." I listened to it twice. Then I saved it. I wasn't sure why I saved it. Instinct, maybe. The same instinct that had made me keep every receipt, every signed form, every dated text from the last 2 years of managing my mother's care without help. I had never thought of it as building a record. I thought of it as staying organized. But looking back now, I wonder if some part of me had always understood that a day like this was coming. Thursday morning, I put on the one blazer I owned, the navy one I'd bought for a job interview 2 years before, and drove to Sylvia's office downtown. It was raining lightly, the kind of rain that doesn't decide what it wants to be. The office was in an older building, the kind with heavy doors and real wood paneling and the smell of paper and something faintly like cedar. Sylvia stood when I came in. She was maybe 60, with silver hair pulled back and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She closed the office door, gestured to the chair across from her desk, and sat down without preamble. "Your mother came to me about 3 years ago," she said. "Not just for a will. She asked me to help her put together a structure that would protect certain things. Specifically, to protect you." I heard the words. I sat with them for a moment. Protect me from what? Sylvia folded her hands. From what she believed was coming. She had watched the pattern long enough. She opened a folder and began explaining. My mother had, over the course of 3 years, transferred ownership of 3 things. Her house, the one she and my father had bought before I was born. The one Rowan had grown up in and always spoken about as if it were already his. A joint savings account that had been established in my name for years, and a small investment portfolio she had quietly built and never mentioned to anyone except me. Once. when she was on pain medication and slipped and said something about the Maple account that I hadn't fully understood until now. All of it was mine. Legally, fully, already mine, with protections in place so that no challenge could easily undo them. I stared at the documents. She never told me. She couldn't, Sylvia said. She was afraid that if you knew, you might inadvertently reveal it, or feel guilty about it. She knew how you were with family. I looked up. How I was? Accommodating, Sylvia said, and the word didn't sound like a compliment the way she said it. It sounded like a diagnosis. She slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My name was written on it in my mother's handwriting, slightly shaky from the illness, but still hers. Still the same looping letters that had signed permission slips and birthday cards for 20 years. She asked me to give you this when the time came, Sylvia said. I'll give you a few minutes. She stepped out. I opened the envelope. My mother's letter was 2 pages long, handwritten on her good stationery, the cream-colored paper she kept in the top drawer of her desk and only used for things that mattered. She started by telling me she was sorry, not in a dramatic way. In the quiet way she had always apologized for things, directly, without decoration. I should have said this to your face, but I kept hoping I wouldn't need to. I kept hoping things between you and your brother would even out on their own. They didn't. I watched him take from you for years, your time, your energy, your presence at my bedside, while he found reasons to be elsewhere. I said nothing because I told myself it was family. I understand now that silence was its own kind of failure. I pressed my hand flat against the page. My eyes were burning. You have always been the one who stayed, who managed, who asked nothing in return. I want you to have the things I can still give you. The house is yours. The account is yours. The portfolio. I called it the Maple account because I started it the autumn after your father left, when you were 8. And you spent an entire afternoon helping me rake leaves without being asked. You never knew I noticed those things. I should have told you. Your brother will fight this. He has always believed that loudness is the same as rightness. Don't let him confuse you. Sylvia knows what to do. Trust her the way I trusted her. And trust yourself. I have always trusted you more than you know. Love, Mom. I sat in that office for a long time after I finished reading. The rain had picked up outside. I could hear it against the window, steady and consistent, the way certain truths are once they finally arrive. When Sylvia came back, I had folded the letter and placed it carefully in my blazer pocket, close to my chest. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said, we wait for them to figure out what they've lost. I didn't wait long. Rowan called Saturday morning at 7:53. I know the exact time because I was still in bed and I watched the screen light up, his name hovering there in the early gray of my bedroom. I let it ring. He called again at 8:12, then Penny at 8:20, then an unknown number at 8:45 that left no voicemail. The texts started around 9. Rowan, we need to talk. The bank says there's an issue with Mom's account. Penny, Rowan is really upset. Can you call us? We're just trying to settle things. Rowan again, the house. Why does the deed say your name? That has to be a mistake. Call me. Then, 20 minutes later, I know you're seeing these. I got up, made coffee, and stood at my kitchen window watching the street below. A neighbor was walking a small dog. 2 kids were on bikes. The world was completely ordinary. I wrapped my hands around my mug and thought about the fact that my mother had spent 3 years quietly building a wall around me while I drove her to chemotherapy appointments and didn't notice. I thought about Roan at the funeral. You can't do this without us. I drank my coffee and didn't reply. By Sunday, 17 missed calls. By Monday morning, 23. Penny had started texting me separately now, which she never did. We were not people who texted separately. The messages shifted from impatient to pleading, and then back to impatient again, cycling through like weather. Monday afternoon my phone rang and I recognized the number. Gerald, my mother's longtime accountant. A quiet man who wore brown sweaters and never seemed surprised by anything. I'm glad you answered, he said. I wanted to call you directly. Your brother contacted me this morning demanding I override the account authorizations. Can he do that? No, Gerald said. Not legally. Not when the account is held solely in your name with no co-signer. A pause. I told him that. He didn't receive it well. I sat down on my couch. What did he say? He said your mother couldn't have meant for this, that she was confused, that you must have taken advantage. Gerald's tone was careful but clear. I've known your mother for 11 years. She was one of the most precise people I've ever worked with financially. The last documents she had me review were dated 4 months ago. She was very much herself. My throat tightened. Thank you for calling me. There's one more thing, he said. Your brother has apparently spoken to an attorney. I don't know the details, but I'd encourage you to let Sylvia know. I called Sylvia the moment I hung up. She already knew. He filed an inquiry this morning, she said, and I could hear papers moving. Challenging the property transfer. He'll argue she lacked capacity. Can he win? No, she said, with the calm certainty of someone who has seen this specific kind of desperation before. Your mother's medical records show full cognitive clarity through the date of transfer. The documentation is ironclad, but he doesn't know that yet. A brief pause. Let him keep going. Every move he makes is information. He showed up at my apartment Tuesday evening. I didn't open the door. I stood in my hallway, absolutely still, and listened to him knock and then call my name and then knock harder. Penny's voice joined his, softer, coaxing, the tone she used when she wanted something and was trying to seem reasonable. We're not here to fight, she said through the door. We just want to talk, as a family. I said nothing. Rowan's voice changed. The reasonable layer dropped. You can't do this. Mom left that house to this family. You had no right to manipulate a sick woman into... That's enough. My own voice surprised me. Quiet. Level. The voice of someone who had decided something and couldn't be talked back from it. Silence on the other side of the door. You should go, I said. I'm not opening the door. If you have legal concerns, contact Sylvia's office. More silence. Then footsteps. Then nothing. I stood in my hallway for a full minute after they left. My heart was beating fast, but my hands were steady. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank it slowly. Then I texted Sylvia. They came to my apartment. I didn't engage. Just wanted you to know. She responded within 2 minutes. Good. Don't engage. Let them exhaust themselves. The meeting is Friday. The meeting was Rowan's idea, technically. He had demanded it through his attorney, a formal sit-down to discuss the estate. Sylvia had agreed because she knew what the meeting would produce. I arrived at Sylvia's office 10 minutes early. I wore the navy blazer again. I had my mother's letter in my inside pocket, not because I needed it for anything legal, but because I wanted it close. Gerald was there too, with a folder on the table in front of him. He nodded at me when I came in. I nodded back. We didn't need to say much. There was a shared understanding between us that felt like respect. Rowan walked in at exactly 2 o'clock with his attorney, a man named something forgettable in a gray suit. Penny followed. She didn't look at me directly. Rowan looked at me too long, the way people look when they're trying to seem calm and not managing it. He had a stack of papers. I almost felt something. Not quite pity, but adjacent to it. The papers were the sign of a man who believed that volume of argument could substitute for quality of argument. Sylvia let him start. He said my mother had been confused. He said the transfer was inconsistent with her wishes. He said I had isolated her. That word, isolated, delivered like a weapon from the rest of the family. He said I had taken advantage of a vulnerable person. I sat with my hands folded on the table and I did not react. When he finished, Sylvia opened her folder. I'd like to present the timeline, she said pleasantly. She laid down the first document, the medical evaluation from 14 months before my mother died, signed by her oncologist, confirming full cognitive function. Then the second, from 8 months out. Then the notarized transfer documents, each bearing my mother's signature. Steady, deliberate, witnessed. Rowan's attorney leaned forward and studied them. His expression shifted slightly. The professional version of realizing the ground is changed. Then Sylvia set down something I hadn't seen before, a printed transcript. She explained it was from a recorded conversation my mother had had with Sylvia herself, 6 months before she died, in which my mother clearly stated her intentions, her reasoning, and her concerns about her son's behavior with regard to family finances. My mother's voice in that transcript was so specifically hers. The careful sentence structure, the pauses, the way she said, "to be clear," before every important point because she wanted to be understood, not just heard. Rowan stared at the transcript. His attorney said nothing. "Your mother recorded that conversation voluntarily," Sylvia said. "She initiated it. She wanted a record of her intentions in her own words." Sylvia's tone remained pleasant throughout. She had the energy of someone who had been waiting for this specific meeting for a long time. "The legal structure your mother put in place is sound. The challenge you filed will not succeed. What happens from here depends entirely on how much time and money you'd like to spend learning that." The room was very quiet. Penny reached over and touched Rowan's arm. He didn't move. His attorney said in a measured voice, "We may need to reassess our position." Rowan looked at me then, not with rage. The rage had somewhere gone out of him. He looked tired. He looked, for the first time in as long as I could remember, like he didn't know what to say. "She really did this," he said. "Not to Sylvia. To me. She protected me," I said quietly. "The same way she always tried to protect all of us. She just finally ran out of time to protect you from yourself." He looked away. They left 20 minutes later. No agreement signed. That would come through attorneys over the following weeks, and it was anticlimactic in the way that legal processes often are when one side has no actual ground to stand on. Forms filed. Documents acknowledged. Challenges withdrawn. It was Sylvia who said, walking me out that afternoon, "You know she knew exactly what she was doing." "I know," I said. "She used to tell me you were the one she worried about, not because you were weak, because you were too good at carrying things without complaint." I stepped out into the late afternoon. The rain from earlier in the week had cleared, and the air had that particular quality it gets after a long stretch of cold, almost surprised at itself, almost gentle. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and thought about my mother raking leaves, about an 8-year-old girl who helped without being asked and didn't know anyone was watching. She was watching. She had always been watching. And she had spent years building something I didn't know I needed until the moment I needed it most. 3 weeks later, I drove to the house for the first time since the funeral. I had a key. I'd had one for years. Used to let myself in to water plants and collect mail when my mother traveled, though she hadn't traveled in a long time. The key felt different now in my hand. Heavier, maybe. Or just more real. Inside, everything was still the way she left it. The blue couch with the worn armrest. The bookshelf with the row of yellow spines she'd collected over 40 years. The kitchen that always smelled faintly of coffee even when the machine was off. I stood in the doorway for a moment before going in. I walked through each room slowly. I wasn't there to decide anything yet. I was just there to be there, to be in the place she had decided to give me, to understand the weight of it. On her desk in the back room, the one she used as an office, I found a small yellow sticky note I hadn't noticed before. It was stuck to the edge of the desk lamp, almost hidden. 4 words in her handwriting. "You always knew how." I peeled it off carefully and held it. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the light to change. I put the sticky note in my pocket alongside her letter and walked back through the house to the kitchen. I filled the kettle the way I had 100 times before when she was alive and stood at the counter while it heated. My phone buzzed. Rowan. I looked at his name for a moment, then set the phone face down. The kettle clicked. I made tea. I sat down at her kitchen table in the house that was now mine and let myself be quiet for a while. There's a specific kind of stillness that comes after a long fight. Not peace exactly, but the absence of the constant low hum of anticipation that you didn't even realize you'd been carrying. That's what I felt sitting at that table. Not triumph. Not relief, even. Just the strange, unfamiliar experience of being somewhere and knowing you're allowed to be there. My mother had believed I was capable of this before I believed it myself. She had put her trust, her home, her carefully tended savings into my hands without asking if I was ready, because she already knew the answer. I finished my tea. I rinsed the cup. I locked the door behind me when I left. There was a lot still ahead. Conversations with Rowan that would be hard and incomplete. Decisions about the house that I wasn't ready to make yet. The slow work of building a life that was genuinely mine instead of the one I'd inherited by default. None of it was going to be easy or clean, but I had something I hadn't had before. Not the house, not the accounts. Those were just things. I had the knowledge that I had been seen, that someone who loved me had looked clearly at what was happening and made a choice. She chose me, and she had chosen me long before I knew I needed to be chosen. If you've ever been the one who stayed, who managed, who showed up without being asked, if you've ever looked around at the people who should have been beside you and found only empty space, I want you to know that being dependable is not the same as being invisible. Someone is watching. Someone is counting. And sometimes the people who matter most are building something quietly, carefully, in the spaces between what's said out loud. I know that now. If this story stayed with you, share it. Someone in your life might need to hear it today. There's something nobody tells you about being the reliable one in a family. Everyone knows your number. Everyone knows you'll pick up. And after a while, that stops feeling like trust and starts feeling like a trap you walked into. So gradually you never notice the door closing behind you. I spent 2 years driving my mother to appointments while my brother sent fruit baskets and showed up at Christmas with a smile that cost him nothing. I didn't resent it. Or I told myself I didn't. I told myself it was just how families work, that people contribute what they can, that being present was its own reward. That's what I believed. That's what I needed to believe to keep showing up without bitterness. But here's what I've come to understand now. On the other side of all of it, the choices we make consistently, over time, are not neutral. They accumulate. They shape things. Every time I drove that car to the hospital and Rowan didn't, a record was being written somewhere. Not by me, not by any court, but by reality itself. And eventually, reality has a way of presenting its invoice. My mother understood this better than anyone. She didn't wait for fairness to arrive on its own. She watched the pattern, recognized where it was heading, and she acted. Quietly, carefully, without announcement. She built something while she still could. That's not luck. That's a form of intelligence that doesn't get talked about enough. The intelligence of paying attention, of seeing clearly, of doing the unglamorous work of preparation when everyone else is comfortable assuming things will sort themselves out. Rowan assumed. He had been assuming his entire life, and the assumption had always paid off because I was always there to make sure it did. The moment I stopped in Sylvia's office and understood that my mother had already drawn a different map, the assumption collapsed. Not because I did anything dramatic, because I simply stopped filling the space he expected me to fill. There's a version of this story where I feel guilty about that, where I wonder if I should have handled it differently. Been softer, found some middle ground. I spent a long time in that version, but I kept coming back to one thing. My mother, near the end of her life, in pain, with limited energy, chose to spend some of that energy protecting me. She saw clearly what I couldn't yet see about my own situation. She didn't tell me what to do. She built something and trusted me to find it when I needed it. That kind of trust isn't given to someone who is weak. It isn't given to someone who can't handle things. It's given to someone who has already been handling things. Quietly, without credit. For a long time, I think about the sticky note she left on her desk lamp. 4 words. You always knew how. She wrote that before she knew if I'd ever find it. She wrote it because she believed it was true, regardless of whether I ever read it. If there is any lesson I carry from this, it's that our actions over time speak louder than any single moment. Rowan's absence at bedsides didn't matter in any one instance. It mattered as a pattern. My presence didn't feel significant in any one appointment. It mattered as a pattern. Character isn't a declaration, it's a record. And I think the most important thing I learned about resilience is this: it doesn't always look like fighting back. Sometimes it looks like staying steady long enough for the truth to catch up. My mother stayed steady. So did I. And in the end, that was everything.